But the topic I want to briefly discuss tonight is an area that I've dedicated a significant portion of my life to, and that is being able to recommend medications and allow people to afford those medications. We're talking about generic drugs that have significant life-extending properties. Properties that reduce the risk of cancer and dementia and atherosclerosis. People cannot afford these drugs because of collusion amongst the drug companies that are sharply elevating the cost of these medications. I personally am on a drug that I need to stay alive. It's called tretinoin. It helps to kill cancer cells. In my case, it's being used to kill viral infected cells. This bottle of tretinoin costs $1,100 per month for a drug that I will probably have to take for the rest of my life. My insurance company pays about $850 of it. I have to pay $250 per month. That is about $3,000 per year that I have to pay, and my insurance company, they have to pay over $10,000 a year for one generic drug. Tretinoin has been around forever. What's going to shock you, and I'm going to tell you this after we put on this CBS News report that was broadcast last night. Bear in mind, we've been battling this since the early 1980s. I was put in jail by the FDA because the drug companies did not want this information to get out. Well, this information is getting out. It got out because the New England Journal of Medicine released a study just yesterday, and CBS News picked up on that study, that we as a citizenry are being ripped off by generic drug companies. And the result is our mission to extend a healthy human lifespan is being impeded. We are facing a roadblock because of what generic drug companies and the FDA are colluding to do. So I'm going to play right now what CBS aired just last night, and then I'm going to conclude with a shocking fact as to what this drug that is costing $1,100 a month, what this drug really costs to make. Even CBS doesn't know, but we do, and we're going to reveal that right after you watch this. So please play this right now.
Some spectacular jumps in generic drug prices were exposed in an article in the New England Journal of Medicine. Doxycycline, an antibiotic, went from 6 cents a pill to $3.36, an increase of more than 5,000%. Captopril, used for hypertension, increased 2,800%. Dr. John LaPook is looking into why.
Barbara Heller has an autoimmune disease called PBC. She takes the generic drug Ursodiol to prevent liver damage.
The last refill that I got for Ursodiol cost $94.50 for 3 months.
In August, she called for her usual 3-month renewal, expecting her cost would still be under $100.
Your price for this drug is $1,212.30.
I was upset. I didn't know what to do. I need Ursodiol every day, probably for the rest of my life. Cost can't be a factor in not getting it.
A recent analysis found nearly 10% of generics more than doubled in price in the past year. Today's article points to the impact of less competition in the generic drug industry. For example, over the last decade, the number of companies making the heart drug digoxin fell from 8 to 3. And the drug price went up by 637%. Dr. Aaron Kesselheim of Brigham and Women's Hospital is one of the authors of the paper.
So without competition, the generic companies can say, what's the price, how much you got?
Yes, everybody just assumes that generic prices are low. But generic prices are low because there's competition. And so once that competition goes away for whatever reason, then you have very expensive generic drugs. And these can be very expensive for patients.
Well, this is 3 months worth. But
after Heller and her husband did extensive research, they were able to find the Ursodiol at a discounted rate. But it was still more than 3 times what she had paid before.
The Generic Pharmaceutical Association points out that in 2013, generics saved the healthcare system $239 billion. The price hikes that threaten those kinds of savings are why a Senate subcommittee chaired by Bernie Sanders will hold a hearing next week.
Doctor, thank you very much.
When we exposed that in the 1980s, we were arrested, we were indicted, we were faced with life in prison. The FDA said we were defrauding the public by recommending that people buy generic drugs from other countries where they cost a fraction of what they did back in the 1980s. Right now, the word fraction is inappropriate. I don't know what the word would be to describe the infinitesimal cost of what generic drugs cost in other countries compared to the rip-offs that consumers are now paying. Now this drug, Trentanoid, that I am being forced to pay $1,100 a month for, and I say me because my insurance premiums, they're going through the roof. And if your health insurance premiums haven't gone through the roof yet, they will next year, and it's because of this type of price gouging. The active ingredient in this drug that is not patented, it's been around forever, remember, $1,100, the active ingredient is 80 pennies, 80 cents for a drug that is selling for $1,100. There's some quality control costs for it. To make a bottle of this might cost $2 or $3 in total, meaning consumers might be charged $10 or $15 in a real market. But we don't have a real market. We have a conspiracy between the FDA and drug companies that is eliminating competition, and it is causing the cost of healthcare to soar. Now, my solution is to introduce legislation that would eliminate the FDA's mandate and control over generic drug manufacturer. In other words, let anybody buy the active material, put it into a capsule, and sell it. I can guarantee it's not hard to do. I mean, there's companies doing it all the time with dietary supplements. Putting 10 milligrams into a capsule is not rocket science, and yet it's illegal. The FDA doesn't allow you to do it unless they give you permission. If they don't give you permission, you can't compete. So I'm going to ask the group here, and I'm going to be asking this amongst a lot of other groups, if we were to organize a protest at local congressional offices demanding an amendment to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to allow low-cost competition, allow Walgreens, allow CVS, allow any of these companies, these big drug chains, to go out and make their own generic drugs. Would you join me for those types of protests? And we will stay there from 9 to 5 demanding a simple change in the law that consumers should have the right to access a Walgreens or a Walmart, for that matter, branded drug. It'll be labeled not approved by the FDA, but you know what? Independent groups like the groups that regulate the electrical industries, that make sure you don't get electrocuted every time you plug something in, those groups can ensure the quality. And it's not that hard when an ingredient only costs 80 cents to put 10 milligrams into a capsule and sell a bottle for a fraction of the price. How many people would like to join me for a protest? Well, that's great. That's great, because that's how you change things for the better. And once we get rid of this problem, then we can recommend medications that can radically extend the human lifespan, and the people can afford them. Because most of these drugs, by the way, that can delay illness, they're generic, but they cost way too much money. Once we bring down the price barriers, lots more people will benefit. I want to thank the group here that presented the Alzheimer's protocols. Those protocols, I believe, are highly efficacious. They've been recommended by people I've been associated with for a number of years. We've seen some of the clinical responses that they have talked about, but the way they defined them and elaborated on them tonight is extremely impressive, and I think we're going to see some nice reversals of what is considered to be an irreversible medical condition. Thank you very much.